In 20 years, he fought his way to 200 million with his fists, but in just 7 years, he lost everything and ended up deeply in debt. Hello, friends. Today we're going to talk about a truly unbelievable story. The main character is Zou Shiming, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, world boxing champion, and the face of Chinese professional boxing. Recently, his wife, Ran Yingying, appeared on a variety show and, right in front of the whole country, opened up their family finances. She revealed that they've slept in separate rooms for 3 years, that in 10 years she wanted a divorce 5 times, and 3 times they even made it to the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau in Beijing. The house in Shanghai, the family home in Guiyang, and even the villa in Los Angeles. All 4 properties have been sold off. Now the family of 5 is renting a place in Shanghai. They still owe tens of millions to 6 friends, and their total debt is close to 200 million. The host asked Zou Shiming, "Is it true that you lost 200 million?" He scratched his head and gave a wry smile. "I don't dare say. Maybe it's even more than that. Right now, the internet is full of criticism. People are calling Ran Yingying a jinx, saying she squandered the family fortune, and blaming Zou Shiming for not focusing on his career. Even with such a huge problem at home, he's still playing Honor of Kings. Friends, if you know about this situation, I want to ask whose side you're on. If you think Zou Shiming was dragged down by Ran Yingying, give me a 1. If you think he just married the wrong woman, or if you believe that the whole family's desires were too big and the failed investment isn't really anyone's fault in particular, give me a 1. It's a family tragedy. If you think Zou Shiming is more at fault, after all, the family's in debt now, and it's his wife who's been live streaming and selling goods to keep things afloat, give me a 1. Zou Shiming, you really need to step up. Let's take a look, friends. What would you choose right now? Whether you know about this situation or not, just based on the limited information you've heard so far, who do you support? Leave a comment and let me know. By the end of today's show, will your opinion change? This isn't just some melodramatic story about a middle-aged couple going bankrupt. Today, I want to share a completely new perspective with you. Zou Shiming and his wife weren't necessarily dragged down by each other, nor did they simply lose to their own desires. They were caught in a carefully crafted trap, and that trap was hidden within the world of professional boxing in China. Behind what looks like a straightforward and rough business, Zou Shiming, an Olympic champion, brought his own resources to the table, thinking he was the main player. But from the very first second he sat down, he was actually just a dish waiting to be eaten. For those who aren't familiar, let's quickly go over the timeline of these 7 years. In 2017, after defending his title at the Shanghai Oriental Sports Center, 36-year-old Zou Shiming announced his retirement. Later, he talked about his mindset when he retired. His thinking was pretty simple. Go back to the sports system, become a small-time leader, drink tea, raise his 3 sons, and just enjoy a good life. But his wife, Ran Yingying, didn't agree. Ran Yingying was a host from CCTV's Securities Information Channel and had an MBA from Peking University. She told Zou Shiming, "You can't spend your whole life just being a boxer." So, starting in August 2018, the couple made a big move on the banks of the Huangpu River in Shanghai. They rented a venue of 18,000 square meters, which is about the size of 2.5 standard soccer fields. They opened what was called the #1 Sports Center, which claimed to be the largest and most luxurious combat sports venue in Shanghai at the time. Let's look at a few numbers to get a sense of the scale here. The annual rent was 50 million yuan, which means just the daily rent alone burned through nearly 140,000 yuan. Each imported treadmill cost 200,000 yuan, and there was a chandelier hanging right in the center of the main hall. That chandelier cost 3 million yuan, and Zou Shiming even gave it a name, Fiery Eyes of Truth. The annual membership started at 38,000 yuan and capped at 88,000 yuan. Do you know what the annual fee was for a regular boxing gym in Shanghai at the same time? It was only 3,000 to 6,000 yuan, which means this price was a full 5 times the market average. But what happened after it opened? According to a report by Phoenix Finance, the average daily foot traffic was less than 100 people, and in 7 years of operation, only 1 month was profitable. Refusing to quit, they opened hot pot and bubble tea shops, an esports firm, an MCN, and did P2P. Data shows they ran nearly 21 companies in 7 years. They lost money everywhere. Ran Ying even put 80 million yuan into a high-interest P2P platform to cover losses. The platform vanished, wiping out their principal. In 2022, the Shanghai risk control venue was completely shut, with its doors tightly closed, but the rigid monthly rent of over 4 million yuan still had to be paid. At this point, the man who once commanded over $1 million in appearance fees for a single event in Las Vegas was completely drained. This is the story we see on the surface. It sounds a lot like a typical case of an athlete's business venture going bust. Didn't understand the industry, got overconfident, and ended up getting dragged down by his wife. But the truth is far more brutal than that. To really understand what Zou Shiming and his wife truly lost, we have to take a look at the boxing market in China. Internationally, there are 4 of the most authoritative professional boxing organizations. And the WBO. Those championship belts we see on TV are all issued by these 4 organizations. Their approach to entering the Chinese market is pretty much the same. They generally follow a similar pattern. They look for a local Chinese agent, known in the industry as a promoter, to carve out their own territory in China. By 2018, which was the year Zou Shiming and his wife officially invested 200 million yuan, the territories of these 4 major organizations had already been completely divided up. The first flag was planted by the WBA. The agency is called Quanwei Sihai, and its boss is Liu Gang. Friends, remember this name. He's going to play a big part later. China's first professional boxing champion, Sheng Xiaozhang, and later Xu Kan were both under his wing. He brought them up. For the past 20 years, all of China's top professional boxers and resources have been tightly controlled by him. Now, the second flag belongs to the IBF agency, called Ruyi Culture, and its boss is Wang Ruhang. The way this company operates is extremely devious. We'll talk about that separately in a bit. Now, the third flag is for the WBO, and the agency is called Shengli Shizha. Behind it stands Top Rank, one of the oldest, most powerful, and most influential promotion companies in the history of global professional boxing. Back then, Zou Shiming signed his own management contract with this very company. In other words, the WBO's sphere of influence was originally the path that brought Zou Shiming closest to success, but he still failed. Why is that? Let's keep watching. By this point, I'm sure everyone has noticed that the first 3 organizations spent a whole decade staking out their territory. They've already locked down China's top boxers, government resources, and the channels for hosting events. By the time Zou Shiming and his wife, full of ambition, entered the Chinese boxing industry with 200 million yuan in cash, there was only one cold dish left on the table that others had already picked over. And that was the World Boxing Council. At that time, the WBC's brand authorization in China was a mess left over from previous chaos, and among the 4 major organizations, it was already the weakest of the bunch. But Zou Shiming and his wife thought they had struck gold. In 2018, Ran Yanging made a high-profile move to secure the title of WBC Greater China president. By November 2019, the couple spent a fortune to host a sensational all-alliance gala at Shanghai's #1 sports center that went viral online. Zou Shiming gave a speech as the president of the Shanghai Boxing Association, while Ran Yanging made a dazzling entrance as the WBC president. President of the World Boxing Council Greater China. Just listen to that title. It sounds so impressive. But if you peel back the packaging, it's still just an empty shell inside. There's no roster of fighters, no network for organizing matches, and no channels for overseas revenue sharing. It's like playing mahjong. Player A grabs a self-draw, player B becomes the dealer, and player C has already claimed all the tiles from the player across the table. There was only one dead end left, and that spot was reserved for Zou Shiming. He walked right in with 200 million in cash, happy as can be. But tell me, how could he possibly win? At this point, you're probably wondering, is Zou Shiming stupid or something? Why would he choose the weakest WBC? Didn't you just say he was already the WBO world champion? Why didn't he stick with the WBO route? Hey friends, that's exactly the right question. This is actually the most hidden thread in this whole tragedy. If you want to understand how Zou Shiming ended up at this dead-end table, we have to break it down. It all goes back to the fallout he had back then with his old promoter, Seta. Let's go back to 2017. At that time, Zou Shiming had just won the WBO Flyweight World Championship belt and was about to defend his title in a make-or-break match at the Shanghai Oriental Sports Center. According to the 3+3 management contract he signed with Seika in 2012, for this high-profile championship fight, Seika was supposed to handle all the arrangements. But at that time, Zou Shiming and his wife felt that he was already famous enough. He was a world champion after all. They thought Seika was taking too big a cut, so why not keep all that money for themselves? Wouldn't that be better? So the couple went ahead and set up their own company called Zou Sports, hoping to bypass Seika and organize the title defense themselves. But Seika immediately hit back by taking Zou Shiming to court with a lawsuit. They demanded 16 million yuan in compensation, but the court ultimately ordered Zou Shiming to pay 4 million and also froze about 2.45 million yuan worth of shares related to Zou Sports. On the surface, this just looks like another typical breach of contract lawsuit over an employee jumping ship. 4 million. For Zou Shiming, who at the time had assets worth 200 million, that was just a drop in the bucket. But friends, this blow was about much more than just 4 million. It cut off his lifeline to the top. How did this happen? First of all, he was quickly blacklisted by the world's top star-making company. In this lawsuit, the world's largest boxing promotion company, Top Rank, immediately sided with Victory Sports and announced that they were cutting all ties with Zou Shiming. The company we mentioned earlier is the world-class promotion factory that once managed Ali, Holyfield, and Pacquiao. If the four major boxing organizations are the governing bodies of professional boxing, then Top Rank is like the core movie studio that creates stars and orchestrates the matches. So when Zou Shiming lost their support, it was as if he lost his passport to top overseas events and the revenue from sponsorships. He was originally a world-class global boxing champion IP, but was shut out by the star-making studios and promotion companies. Wouldn't you say that overnight he was downgraded to just a local Chinese brand? Second, and most importantly, Shengli Shijie is not just an ordinary management company. Shengli Shijie is just the one working on the front lines. Standing behind it is the true giant of Chinese entertainment capital, China Media Capital, CMC. What kind of entity is China Media Capital? Founded in 2009, it was the first national-level private equity fund in the cultural industry, specially approved by the National Development and Reform Commission of the Chinese Communist Party. After investing 50 billion yuan, they've dominated China's cultural industry, including the Voice of China, Oriental DreamWorks, the 8 billion yuan Chinese Super League rights, TVB, and the English Premier League. They even spent $400 million for a stake in Manchester City's parent company. The mastermind, Li Rugong, was a former Shanghai official and media head. A rapidly promoted insider, he left the government in his 40s to manage hundreds of billions in assets, a true super white glove operator. And behind Li Rugong, according to long-term reports from Boxun and many other overseas Chinese media outlets, stand two of the most elite red families of the Chinese Communist Party. The first is the family of Li Changchun, former member of the Politburo Standing Committee who oversaw national ideology and propaganda for many years. According to years of revelations by overseas media, his daughter, Li Tung, is the true boss behind the scenes at China Media Capital. With the father holding the highest approval authority over the country's culture and media industries, the daughter operates the major capital maneuvers of cultural assets from outside the system. The highest approval power in China's entertainment industry and the most lucrative capital operations are connected through this father-daughter duo, forming a perfect closed loop of power and money. The second point is that among the early shareholders of China Media Capital, a state-owned enterprise called Shanghai United Investment repeatedly appears. So what about this company? Starting in 1994, when Jiang Zemin's eldest son, Jiang Mianheng, became chairman, it turned into the flagship platform for the Jiang family to build their technology, telecommunications, and capital empire. So, my friends, this is a progression from Li Changchun and the Jiang Zemin family down to China Media Capital, an in-system giant so wealthy it could rival a nation, holding all of China's top entertainment copyrights. Then to Victory family, which secured massive strategic investments and controlled top fighters and events. And only after that did it become part of Victory family at the time. What about Zou Shiming? So when he was under the Victory family banner, Zou Shiming was the most favored darling on this entire top-tier capital chain. Every punch he threw, every title defense he made was backed by this intricate network of red capital and provided a safety net. But in that 2017 lawsuit, from a legal standpoint, he breached the contract and had to pay $4 million. However, in the world of connections, he personally shut off that upstream pipeline. From that moment on, his golden champion status, once illuminated by red capital, was downgraded to a lone fighter with no one backing him. In China's circles, this is called breaking out of the circle. But in this country, breaking out comes at a price. The tuition fee is 200 million. Meanwhile, at the same time, several other players in Chinese boxing were only getting bigger and bigger. At that time, within the landscape of Chinese boxing, two survival strategies had already emerged. One was the highly specialized professional route, holding top-tier fighters in capital with a pedigree of professional achievements. The other was extremely sharp and perceptive. It's called the arbitrage route, without raising a single fighter, just reaping the dividends. What dividends? We'll get to that in a moment. First, let's look at the first path, which is the style of Liu Gang, the godfather of WBA negotiations. Liu Gang, as we mentioned earlier, is that guy. This man is recognized within the boxing community as the principal of the Wampa Military Academy. He himself competed in the Olympics and was among the first group of Chinese boxers to go overseas and fight professionally. While Zou Shiming and his wife were spending tens of millions to open a luxury boxing gym in the heart of Shanghai as a showpiece, Liu Gang's base was simply called the Iron Blood Boxing Gym. On the contrary, it was extremely simple and bare bones, focusing only on results rather than decoration. But he spent every penny on things the audience couldn't see, right where it mattered most. For years, he supported dozens of professional boxers, covering their food, lodging, and salaries. He sent promising talents to Los Angeles for training camps and batches, paying by the hour in US dollars to hire top-level professional sparring partners. And his relationship with the Chinese communist system was handled with masterful skill. All those troublesome issues that local sports bureaus dreaded most, like what to do with athletes eliminated from provincial sports teams or how to place retired athletes, were completely taken care of by Liu Gang's club. By helping the system solve the major issue of post-retirement stability, he gained something in return, a steady and completely free talent reservoir. Now, you're probably wondering about one thing: supporting dozens of people like this year-round and even sending them to the US for training with top coaches. Where exactly did Liu Gang's money come from? Let's take a look at a thought-provoking scene. On January 26, 2019, in Houston, USA, Su Khan, a disciple under Liu Gang, defeated Rojas and was crowned the WBA World Boxing Champion. At the moment the referee announced the result, the first person to rush onto the ring and tightly embrace Su Khan, even with tears in his eyes, wasn't the coach or his parents, but a middle-aged man in a suit and tie. His name is Zhao Jun, and he is the CEO of Tiao Power. What is Tiao Power? It's the Chinese sports media giant that, in 2015, spent 8 billion RMB in one go to buy the exclusive rights to the Chinese Super League for 5 years. He is the financial backer behind Liu Gang. And who is behind Tiao Power? It's China Media Capital, CMC. Friends, as you can see, the same China Media Capital, on one hand, they used Zou Shiming, who was still under Shang Lishija at the time, to package Zou Shiming as a global internet IP. On the other hand, through Tiao Power, they were supporting Liu Gang and his group of boxers. With just this setup, they had already taken control of all the top Chinese boxers and event resources at the time. So what really makes Liu Gang impressive is his ability to leverage small resources for big results. He trains his own fighters, develops talent, has access to physical training and event resources, and behind all that, he's backed by national-level capital. On the surface, it looks like he's just running a modest boxing gym, but in reality, he's tapped into the biggest and most powerful capital pipeline in China's sports industry. This is exactly the first approach we just talked about, twisting together the professional sports system and capital into a powerful force. Now let's talk about the other giant. But he takes a completely opposite approach. He hardly trains any fighters himself, doesn't have a training base, and doesn't operate in expensive places like Shanghai. Instead of burning money to open gyms, they discovered another gold mine. Local governments in China are extremely willing to foot the bill for national interests in people's livelihoods. If you look at the map of where they hold their events, you'll see they're all in places like Macau, Zhuzhou, Wenzhou, Yinchuan, Xi'an, and Suzhou. They almost never go to first-tier cities like Beijing or Shanghai, where approvals are strict and costs are high. Instead, they specifically target second- and third-tier cities. Why? Because officials in these second and third tier cities all have a common, pressing need to boost their political achievements, create a city brand, and present an international image. So, the IBF team shows up with the golden brand of the World Boxing Championship. Then they wrap it all up in the trendiest grand narrative, the Belt and Road International Boxing Silk Road Championship League. They take what is essentially a purely commercial boxing match and package it as a political mission aligned with the national strategy. Tyson was even named charity ambassador. Consequently, local bureaus and state enterprises essentially footed the bill. In 2017, IBF and CCTV hosted the New Year's Cup in Macau. CCTV's two-day broadcast drew over 300 million viewers. Just imagine the scale of the business deals behind that. So the IBF's model is asset-light and operates like a pop-up. They just come in to hold the event. Do you want prestige and political achievements? Well, I want real cash. You provide the government budget, and I make money off the execution margin. As soon as the event is over, the team immediately flies out. They don't need to rent venues in prime locations, and they don't have to keep a single staff member on payroll. Friends, compare these two approaches. Look at Liu Gang's path with the WBA. It's all about professionalism and connections, putting up his own money, and getting backing from national-level giant capital as a strategic lifeline. Talent comes from the system, and free participation in competitions is backed by local government finances. The IBF, on the other hand, doesn't run boxing gyms, doesn't keep boxers on payroll, and doesn't operate any heavy assets. They specialize in pop-up events, fully capitalizing on the benefits of local governments footing the bill for national interests and public welfare. These two organizations, one has mastered the system and capital, while the other has mastered political achievements and public finances. As for Zou Shiming and his wife, they went in on their own, holding 2 bags of cash, and dove straight into the most expensive area of Shanghai real estate. They built and managed a huge team for training and operations, cut themselves off from top-tier capital networks, and still hope to earn back their investment and fill the financial gap through ticket sales and merchandise. In 2019, the Shanghai International Boxing Gala that Zou Shiming poured all his efforts into organizing had a sponsorship list announced by Sina Sports that's really worth a closer look. A Shanghai Rural Commercial Bank, a Tibetan Glacier Mineral Water Company, an automobile manufacturer, an instant imaging company, and they even managed to bring in a blockchain company. Even a blockchain company showed up. Just think about how tight their cash flow must have been at that time. And if you look at the guest list for that day's gala, on the surface it seemed bustling and grand. Leaders from the Shanghai Sports Bureau gave speeches in person, and the global chairman specially flew in to show respect. But not a single top official from the General Administration of Sport attended, nor did any heads of sports bureaus from other provinces or cities. The real financial backers behind the 4 major factions were all absent. Not a single cent was invested into Zou Shiming's system, Liabang. He was just sitting in the audience, politely expressing his praise and approval. But if you know how things work in this circle, that's just showing support. It's not the same as actually joining in. So at this point, what's the real reason why Zou Shiming ended up losing so much money? The answer is already becoming clear. Zou Shiming and his wife were at the bottom of the pyramid, doing the hardest work, leading teams into hundreds of elementary and middle schools to teach self-defense, going to East China Normal University to start courses, paying $50 million a year in rent, 1 square meter at a time. Meanwhile, those at the top of the pyramid, the red capitalists collecting royalties and platform fees, didn't even have to build a single building. Have you ever wondered about something? Why did the director of the Shanghai Sports Bureau give all the titles to Zou Shiming? From the Shanghai Boxing Association to October 2024, he's been re-elected as president for the 6th term, but he's the only one who doesn't get a single cent. Tragedies like this, where someone is put on a pedestal by grand narratives and institutional applause, only to end up using everything they have to pay for others, are all too common in the history of Chinese business. In the early 1990s, Shi Yuzhu started out in software and was an idol for intellectuals across the country. Originally, he just wanted to build an 18-story giant tower in Zhuhai as his company's office building, with all the accounts clear and transparent. But when the applause and spotlight came crashing down, officials from all over came to inspect the project, and the media went wild, touting it as the tallest building in the country and a new landmark. These grand ideas pushed him forward like a tidal wave, and as a result, Shi Zhu's ambitions were leveraged to the extreme by everyone's demands. From 18 stories to 38, then to 54, then 64, and finally, it was set at a staggering 70 stories. In the end, as everyone knows, every extra floor wasn't driven by market demand, but just to boost other people's egos. Ultimately, this bottomless pit completely drained all the giant group's cash flow. As soon as the building's foundation was finished, it all came crashing down. Shi Zhu also went from being China's richest man to owing $250 million overnight. If you compare Zou Shiming's #1 sports center with Shi Zhu's giant building, you'll see that these two tragedies are basically copies of each other. Both protagonists brought their own resources to the table. Shi Zhu made tens of millions from software, while Zou Shiming earned $200 million from his fights on TV. Both of them were driven by ideals. Shi Zhu wanted to build a city landmark, while Zou Shiming wanted to create a calling card for Chinese sports. The pattern is exactly the same. Onlookers enthusiastically bestowed titles and grand visions, but when it came to money, they kept their wallets tightly shut. Applause, approvals, and speeches kept lifting the protagonist higher and higher, layer by layer, until he couldn't stand steady and came crashing down. After the collapse, those who left the scene had already achieved fame and success, with their accomplishments recorded in their files. Only the person at the center of it all is left kneeling in the snow, crying in pain and paying the price. The only difference is that Shi Zhu later made a comeback with Naobaijian, but can Zou Shiming make a comeback now? No one knows. All we do know is that right now, he and his family are still squeezed into a rented apartment in Shanghai, getting ready for their next live stream sales session. When the camera turned to him again and asked about losing $200 million, this former world champion could only force a bitter smile. Owing $200 million, I can't say for sure. Maybe it's even more than that. Friends, after watching this, who do you think is really responsible for Zou Shiming's downfall? Has your answer changed? Leave a comment and let me know. All right, that's all for today's story. Thank you all for watching. Before you leave, could I ask you for a small favor? If you haven't given me a like yet, please do. Dear friends, you're welcome to subscribe to True Perspective. And please also share my show with more people. Don't forget about the fans' Hot Recommend hype feature. It helps my videos reach a wider audience. Thanks again for watching. Here, let me thank everyone in advance. I'll see you again tomorrow at the same time on True Perspective. Don't miss it. Bye-bye.